Welcome to the Heartbreak to Happiness Show with Sara Davison. If you're struggling with a breakup and you feel shocked, angry, betrayed, devastated, or sad and alone, then this podcast is for you. Best-selling author and award-winning host Sara Davison shares how you too can get on with your life to heal, grow, and move from heartbreak to happiness. Here's your host, Sara Davison.
Welcome back to the show, and today my guests are Dr. Elsbeth, Meuth and Freddy Zental Weaver. Elsbeth and Freddy have assisted thousands of couples and singles to create lasting intimacy and fulfillment in their life and relationships. They're featured on Showtime's documentary series Sexual Healing and the Emmy award-winning NBC show Starting Over. They're best authors of Sexual Enlightenment, endorsed by world-renowned spiritual pioneer, Dr. Michael Beckwith. Elsbeth and Freddy are husband and wife, as well as business partners, and they live in Chicago. So I am super excited to welcome Elsbeth and Freddy to the show. Welcome, guys.
Hi, Sara. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on.
Well, I'm very excited about this topic because being British, we don't talk about sex much. So this is going to push probably a lot of my listeners a little bit out of their comfort zone, and it's going to be really interesting. Now, I've read your book. It's fascinating. I have so many questions for you both. But to start us off, tell us a little bit about your upbringing, because that was really interesting in the book, how you both got to be experts in this field. But you started in very different places, didn't you?
Yeah, we did, Sara. Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about me. I was first introduced to these practices when I was 13 years old, living in Hawaii. I was going through my puberty and spending a lot of time in the shower. My father at the time was a practicing psychiatrist, and he took pity on me. Probably thought I was going to hurt myself in there. So he gave me a book to read on how to integrate meditation and sex practices. So I loved it. My girlfriend loved it. I had this dream of playing college basketball on athletic scholarship, but doubted my capacity and skill. So the practices actually allowed me to get past that doubt and that, ambivalence. And I did go on to college and played on athletic scholarship. After college, I kept reading and doing these practices and applying them in my personal relationships, and never thought I'd teach this, but I was in the software business for a long time. And initially it was really exciting to be in that industry. And then after about 15 years, it was just a job. So I was looking at how to reinvigorate, re-inspire myself. So there was a job opportunity in Chicago. So they hired me, moved me there. I was single at the time. I was online looking for Shakti, a female Tantra partner. And I found Elsbeth. And I really came to Chicago to meet Elsbeth because we, 6 months to the day, formed this work. And it's been 21 years. We've worked all over the world with couples and singles and individuals, teaching them these practices that we're going to talk more with you about. So that's how I started with this.
Yeah, I was the icing on the cake of coming here.
Yes.
For you, wasn't I?
You were, and you're the cherry on top, absolutely.
So my story is very different, as you already know, Sara, from the book, from our introduction to our Sexual Enlightenment book. And so I wish I would have had a dad who would have given me a book on sex consciousness when I was a teenager. But far from it. I don't know about you, Sara, and your home, but that was not customary in my family. Just the opposite.
Or mine. British, remember, this is not something that we talk about that openly.
It's not much different in most parts of the world, actually, but yeah.
So anyway, I grew up in Germany, as you may be able to tell from my accent, and came to the United States in my late 20s to do postgraduate work in music, and then got my doctorate in education and moved on into management consulting. So that was in the 90s, and I had gotten really good at the consulting part, yet was miserable in relationship. I had this pattern of attracting unavailable men. And while that was quite exciting, most of the time I was alone. And I remember vividly, there came a time when I got very despaired, like seeing the trajectory in front of me. If I was not going to shift this pattern, I would end up most likely without lasting intimacy and love in my life. And I didn't want that.
Mm.
So there was something that eluded me. So I put myself on the way to find out what that was that kept me from being able to sustain love and intimacy. And I delved deeply into meditation and then deeply into studying Tantra. And it was so life-changing for me that I not only left consulting, but as you can tell now, through meeting Freddy 6 months beyond my tantric healing, my tantric clearing, shifted pretty much my life. And the clearing, what it was about, was that I discovered that I had held distrust towards men. And I did not know about that. I was very charming. You would not have, called me a distrusting bitch if you had known me 25 or 23 years ago. I reeled them in. I was very inviting. Yet underneath, what we call the subconscious, that is what was running the show, not visible to my conscious mind. So we can unpack this a little bit more, because I think many women struggle with, actually live in some illusion and cannot get out of it. So,
yeah, I think you're so right. And I think when you come out of a relationship and you're heartbroken and maybe you've been betrayed, we do go on a bit of journey of self-discovery again, and trying to break down, why things have happened to us and learn from those. So it's a great time to start looking at these things. Now, your book is called Sexual Enlightenment. What is sexual enlightenment?
Great, good question. And the reason we're here.
Yeah.
So sexual enlightenment, what we are doing is, forever we've been procreating with the sexual energy, creating life. The last 100 or so years, recreating with the development of contraceptives. And what we're sharing is how to co-create with this creative life force energy, creating life before we had language. So what we're teaching are specific distinctions that allow one to draw on the altered state of consciousness that happens when we're in the sexual experience, right? So when our energy is one, it can manifest a lot of different ways. It's all energy, just a lot of energy. It's all energy. But when it manifests as sexual energy, it's unique, it's creative, and it's pleasurable. So in that altered state, learning the practices of the witness state of mind, breathing with intention, like say, I want to get over this broken heart and I want to love again. Getting in touch with how that lives for us as a belief, and working with the energetic realities of that. How, I feel sad in my heart, my muscles are tight, I can't breathe, whatever else shows up, to be able to watch all of that, to get a little distance from it in that altered state, is what we're working with in terms of how the sexual energy and the aliveness of that allow us to get more deeply connected with what Elsbeth mentioned earlier, the subconscious aspects of how all things live for us.
Yeah, and Sara, it's all about coming to live a fulfilled life. If this is by ourselves or with another, with a beloved, wherever I am, it's me who is there. So whatever I radiate, affects my environment. And so that coming to inner bliss as a state versus a destination has a lot to do with cultivating sexual enlightenment. I would like to build a little bit on that so that the listeners can get a sense of, how could that be made applicable to myself? So if we look at the human being, there is this life force energy running through us that is given to us from the moment of conception to the moment we leave this planet. We do not generate it. It is within us. However, given that life force energy and breath go hand in hand, we can affect the flow of life force energy through the breath. So how we know that they go together is when we see someone die, what goes last is the breath. And once the breath is gone, life force energy is gone. So if they go together in dying, they must go together when we are alive. And we put this to use here. So one aspect is that we learn how to drop into our conscious breath, because we breathe all the time, but not consciously, So it's the diaphragmatic breath, and that leads us actually then to become more aware of our energy, life force energy that moves up from the base of the spine to the top of the head and back down again. It does this all the time. Each inhalation, it goes up. Exhalation, it goes down, just like blood flow. We don't notice blood flow, but guess what? It flows there all the time. The same with life force energy. Then life force energy is sexual energy. We often think, oh, there's life force energy, and then at some point when I'm aroused, it's sexual energy. No, it's the same energy, just showing up at different gradations, like from a subtle state to perhaps a pleasant state, when I'm a little bit more, when I feel the breeze on my skin, and then all the way up to a highly aroused state, the climactic state or the ejaculatory state. So although ejaculatory state is not much a state, it comes and goes quickly. But anyway, so we can learn how to play that whole, gradation, just like a flute that has different registers. So we become aware and then can move emotional energy, mental energy, and yes, sexual aroused energy, so that it imbues our whole being, our body. You can imagine that this becomes a much fuller experience in the pleasure state, both in solo practice and then, of course, also in beloved's practice. And then we can learn to channel that wonderful creative energy into our pursuits. If I move that up consciously through my third eye, I can send it into my podcast. I can send it into a new project, because it's creative energy.
I love that. I mean, it's fascinating to hear what you're saying, because I think most people think that sexual energy is really reserved for the bedroom rather than in all areas of our life. So how can that benefit us in everyday life?
Yeah, it's the listening that happens when we bring consciousness to this sexual energy. So whether you're doing consciousness work or not, when we're in that energy, as I mentioned earlier, we're in an altered state, right? We're more loving, open, vulnerable, receptive. Chemically, we're changed, more oxytocin, endorphin, serotonin, the feel-good hormones. So when you bring consciousness to that altered state with intention, what starts to show up are the kernel or the essence of that energy, creativity and pleasure. So when we're listening at that level, the stories that we tell ourselves, the conversations that we have internally affect our energy and our feeling and our emotions and the way that we view and react or in the world. So as opposed to like, well, I hate my job, 30 more years of retirement, that dog doesn't hunt anymore, because what happens when we have that conversation energetically? I don't feel excited about my work. I'm feeling more, less energetic. And so when we start listening at that level, we shift the whole way we're perceiving and experiencing our life. So it goes beyond the bedroom. So again, we can have a lot of fun with sex, and it's been that way forever. There's an intelligence. And sometimes people listen to this conversation, they might go, oh, this sounds a little woo-woo, but what's really woo-woo are single-cell amoebas, multi-celled organisms, a universe that goes on for ad infinitum, and that's our lineage. So we're just starting.
I love woo-woo, by the way. I love woo-woo on the show. We love woo-woo on the show.
Good. That keeps us open. So yeah, I think there's a lot. I think that, as we can continue to stop the vilification and unconsciousness around our sexual selves, we can start to build a world that sees ourselves in each other. Peace is just a thought away. So if we could teach these practices to nuns and priests if they were vowed to celibacy. It's about where we are when we're in that sexual energy as a way of being. It's not even about the act once you bring the consciousness to it. And it doesn't take away from the other things that we do with sex.
Yeah. Actually, I want to say that really becoming more aware of our sexual, emotional, spiritual self and come into tune with these three anchors, given that socially and historically, the sexual and the spiritual were separate. They didn't belong together, perhaps to this day. But we are these human beings, the earthly and heavenly beings simultaneously. That makes us so miraculous, and we can feel both, we can tune with both. And then coming to that, actually, my sexual self informs my heart self, informs my mental and spiritual self, and vice versa, so that my spirit speaks to my sexual being, to my pleasure being. It's all one, yet they are different dimensions.
I find this fascinating, and I'm listening and thinking, I mean, I love this. And you two, if you're watching on YouTube, you are glowing. This is coming from your hearts, which it's obviously flows through you, which is phenomenal to see. And I encourage everyone to jump on YouTube and watch the video. What about the stigma and the shame that is associated? And I know you were talking, Elsbeth, a little bit about how you grew up. It wasn't something that you were comfortable talking about. How do you get to the point from that background where you are talking about it so freely and so comfortable to talk about it, not just, within your relationship, but also to others as well? How do people listening, maybe that they're struggling with that? What advice do you have to help them to shift to that point?
Yeah, so shame, fear, guilt, and embarrassment is so much associated with pleasure. And this is not an individual emotion. These are not individual emotions. They are collective emotions that we inherited from our parents, grandparents, generationally. And so how I hear your question is like, how can I free myself from these, debilitating emotions, because they actually constrict my life force energy, which is pleasure energy, not only in the bedroom, but in life itself. So you say we are glowing. It has a lot to do with each of us, doing our regular practices of moving our energy, connecting with each other, and often not necessarily sexually, but emotional flow.
And let me add to this in terms of how do we actually shift something that is so deeply wired for us. So the thing that connects us to this elegant design of the universe that goes on forever is our imagination, our capacity to conceive of something that's never been before. So in this case, let's say I want to get past my shame and guilt around my sexual self. So when I go to, say, a self-love practice, we're not even calling it masturbation, but a self-love practice where you're actually doing meditation, some of the practices that we teach around the distinctions of working with your life force energy. And then that thing shows up, that guilt, and that shame. And then so we develop what's called the witness state of mind, where we can start to step a little bit away from the physical experience of how that shows up for us, the story making that we have around that. And we can watch that and we can breathe into that. And what happens in a very short period of time is we, what I call, start to flatten those beliefs and those energetic reactions. And then eventually it's just a blip on the horizon. And then we're moved with grace, ease, and flow towards what we wanted to create. And that's the practical application to this work as we can use it to live more fully.
Sara, could I give an example?
Yes, please.
Yeah, from my personal life, actually, because I mentioned earlier that, the practice of Tantra was so deeply healing for me and really shifted my life in many ways, or I shifted my life through it. And when I went through the healing, when I discovered that I distrusted men, it was not conceived from my conscious mind, because I had done therapy around an earlier experience when I was 18 years old. First boyfriend, first love, very blissful relationship. And then he asked me to have intercourse. And I said yes, although I was not ready. And it was very painful. I had to go to the gynecologist, and the bill from the gynecologist went to my house. My dad opened it. All hell broke loose. He called me a whore. The boyfriend left a few weeks later. So there I was, totally alone, felt abandoned, and no soul to turn to. That was also the time when I started closing off. Now, this is not a conscious decision or act we do. It's a protection. It's to cope. And along with that closing off, I said to myself, see, Elsbeth, men are never there for you when you really need them. And that decision trailed my young adult life, my older adult life. And while I had done therapy around it, so I thought that was resolved. But what I didn't know, what showed up for me in my tantric healing, that accesses the whole being, the physical, the sexual, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual. What I saw was that there was a memory of that experience, like on the cellular level in my sexual center. The sexual center for a woman is called yoni in Sanskrit, and yoni means sacred space, much more endearing than our clinical vagina, all kinds of not so pleasing terms for her. The sacred spaces that I honor, that I cherish. And in the ritual, that is really how I encounter myself and how the practice partner I worked with encountered myself. So it was not about sex, it was not about the giver, it was totally about me, where out of being there for me, this practice partner, in such a selfless way, just to support me so that I could clear what I wanted to clear, that in itself was a healing, because that a man could be there for me, without his own agenda, particularly in such proximity, that we were in. And so what came up, what I remembered at that moment, and like it was a feeling, was that 18-year-old, the pain, the physical, the emotional pain, was just like opening a valve where the steam comes out more intensely and then fizzles, was the same kind of feeling. It got very intense, yet then it all fizzled out. And in place of it, what opened up for me was deeper trust for myself. Because in this kind of situation where we feel abandoned or betrayed, not cared for, not listened to, is usually, that we just, as I said, we close off and don't want to open up anymore. And so deeper trust in myself, trust in men in general. And then Freddy came into my life 6 months later. Now, for me, that was very much the intention of my work, that I wanted to get clear what was in the way, clear that, so that I was ready energetically, emotionally, for the beloved to come into my life. And Freddy was available. And if I hadn't done my clearing work, guess what? I would not have recognized him as a potential partner, because it would not have fit with the pattern.
Yeah, and I think it's so, it's so interesting you say, actually facing up to what was going on and not running away from it, not shutting it down. I think very often that's, it's definitely something I work with on my clients to face up to. A lot of people listening will have been coming out of relationships where maybe they have had their trust broken, as you were talking about there, or they've been betrayed, or maybe they were in a toxic or abusive relationship. So their confidence is very low. And the thought of dating anyone else is just not something they want to consider for a very long time, if ever. I've had clients saying, I'm never going to date again. I'm not wanting to open myself up to that kind of pain. And the thought of having sex with somebody, if you've been married for many, many years, that can be, even if you haven't, that can be a very daunting prospect. So What advice, Freddie, do you have for somebody who's facing that right now and thinking, well, this is all great and nice, but it's not for me because I don't want to put myself in that position. I can't imagine getting naked with somebody again.
Yeah. And again, if someone chooses and they're happy in that choice, there's nothing that anyone can say that should make them want to do anything else. It's when they want to do something else, but they just can't imagine it, but they want to. That's
Right.
when these practices can be really vital. And so what Elsbeth shared in her experience is what happens for all of us. We have these impacting moments in our life. I mean, potty training. I mean, being born. I mean, this stuff is like remembering what we've forgotten, because we start out in the womb, womb service, and we're just floating in the embryonic fluid, and life is wonderful. And all of a sudden we're born and there's bright lights. We're whacked on the bottom. Some guys are getting their wee-wees cut. I mean, you're thinking, send me back. And then life happens, all the ups and downs and goods and bads. And we are remembering decisions we had are made to survive those moments, broken hearts and all the other things. So when we get along to a point where we want to create something new that we haven't done before, and it's counter to something that we had an impacting experience that, like, not to diminish what happened, but it lives for us like it happened just now, or it's happening now. That's when these practices are really important. So the first piece to getting past it, to answer your question, or working towards what we want to create, is developing what we call the witness state of mind. And I can give your listeners an experience of that in 1 minute, if you want.
Yes, please. Yeah,
okay.
Go for it.
So this is a breathing practice, and this helps to develop first to see how busy our minds are. So have your listeners and you and me, we all just sit up comfortably, feeling on our sit bones. Good. Eyes can be open, closed, or soft focus. This breathing is parasympathetic, so you want to put a hand on your belly, breathing through the nose. So quiet your mind, bring your awareness to your breath, following your breath into your nose, down your trachea, into your lungs, extending into your diaphragm and belly like a big balloon on your inhalation. So really feel that extension as you inhale. Follow with your awareness your breath back up and out through your nose in your own pace, depth, and rhythm. Letting any thoughts or conversations, interpretations, or meaning go for now. When you get distracted, bring your awareness back to following your breath into your nose, down your trachea, lungs, extending into your diaphragm and belly like a big balloon on your inhalation. Stay with that breathing. You are your own witness to any thoughts, conversations, interpretations, or meaning. For these few moments, you have nothing to do but breathe and be. Stay with that breathing, following your breath into your nose, trachea, lungs, extending into your diaphragm and belly like a big balloon on your inhalation. Following your breath back up and out through your nose in your own pace, depth, and rhythm.
And while you're breathing in and out, enjoying the breath coming and going, just like the ocean wave. Take a moment and notice how you're feeling right now, how your body is feeling. Notice any sensations or the absence of sensations. Now notice your emotional state. Just notice. And notice your state of mind, your state of thought. And when you are ready, come back by opening your eyes. And Sara, if you could share with us how you're feeling right now.
It shuts down a lot of the internal chatter, doesn't it, that's going on because you're focusing on the breathing.
That's the key, is because when we breathe normally, sympathetically in our upper chest and lungs, we don't think about it. The body gets oxygenated, it's all good. When we breathe parasympathetically, we actually have to put our mind's focus on bringing the breath down and extending the diaphragm and belly. And most of us can do it for about 3 breaths before a story starts or a conversation or interpretation or something happens. So as you continue to do this, we start to develop, again, watching the thoughts without the total felt sense of the thoughts. Like they come up, but they just go away. We don't put any attention on them. And that's the capacity that we want to keep building on with more familiarity and accessibility to when we have something we want to create, but the old story keeps coming up. I want to be in a relationship, but I can't imagine it. But I want to be in a relationship, but I can't imagine it. And then we can start to flatten again that old story and experience as it lives for us.
Yeah. And relationship, yes or no, it's not, that is not so important. The important part is that we heal our own suffering. Because if that goes on within me, there is suffering, there is, discomfort, be it physical, emotional, mental. I'm not integrated. I don't feel well, on all levels. So for the sake of that, first and foremost.
And so, Sara, again, when you add the sexual meditation to this practice as one of the pieces, as the foundational piece, you can see how you are intimately exposed to aspects of your subconscious and your belief systems that normally we don't get to in just the analytical, oh, thank you for helping me understand why I fired my mother because I fought with my girlfriend or whatever. The stories, we can get in touch with the energy and the beliefs and how that lives for us. And choice starts to show up.
I love it. I love it. I mean, I think all this is very, very important, and being in tune with your own energy is key. So for people listening right now, how can people find out more about you guys and the work you do and get in touch with you?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So our website is really a great place to start out. It's called TantraNova.com, TantraNova, TantraNova, like supernova. So we are the new Tantra. It's TantraNova.com. And there are lots of resources on the homepage. Just scroll down, you get to our book, Sexual Enlightenment, which you can get either in hard copy or audio book. And then there are, videos on the website. You can go to our YouTube channel. And then there's also a program page. Like, for example, I work with women only as well, both one-on-one, all over the world through Zoom or here at the Institute, TantraNova Institute in Chicago. I teach a 3-day retreat for women where I actually really, guide women in what we have been looking at in this conversation. How can I actually connect with the beloved within, make peace, trust myself, and connect to my wonderful alive energy, and however that may show up. So Freddy also has a men's workshop. So if someone wants to send their man to, learn about his energy and how to connect his sex with his heart, which is really, essential for men to become more integrated. So that's all available. And then, of course, our co-ed workshops, and people can come once they feel ready. Also as singles, they pair up with another single. Initially in our foundation's work, we don't go to the sexual. It's all about cultivating emotional intimacy within, with self, and then with a partner. That doesn't mean that I have to become lovers with that practice partner. No, the practice partnership is there to see something about myself and get the opportunity to shift it in the moment. So that it is no longer baggage of mine. And so in the practice partnership, we support each other. And I started studying Tantra like that because I didn't have a partner.
I love it. I mean, gosh, there's so many things you guys do, so much opportunity to work with you. I have one last question for you guys that I ask all my guests who come on my podcast. The podcast, as you know, is called Heartbreak to Happiness. And I believe it's really important to identify what happiness is for you so you can spot it along the journey. So what is happiness for you both?
Well, for me, Sara, it's one, teaching these practices to people and seeing what opens up for them in their quest to create more happiness and joy and fulfillment in their life. And two, riding my motorcycle around the country on tours. And three, singing jazz. And probably maybe one, being with my beloved Elsbeth.
Mhm.
That's a lot of happiness. I love it. Elsbeth.
Yes, and my key to happiness is really that opening my heart to myself. So whenever I'm burdened with something or question something or disconnected with Freddy, what I have found to drop into my heart and listen to my heart. What would you like at this very moment? And then I wait for the answer. The answer may not come right away, but it usually shows up, perhaps through someone else, or the way Freddy is with me, or just, shifting out of my misery.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you guys. I mean, you've shared so much wisdom, so many insights. And obviously, if people listening would like to go and get your book, Sexual Enlightenment, and is available in on Audible as well, I think. So that's awesome. But thank you so much for being such fabulous guests.
Oh,
Thank you, Sara. Yeah, really
Sara,
great.
yeah.
Great being here with you on your platform.
That's it for today's episode. Do head on over to TantraNova.com to find out more about Elsbeth and Freddy and all the different work they do. And I look forward to you joining me on my next episode.
That's it for today's episode of Heartbreak to Happiness. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to win a free ticket to one of Sara's virtual retreats. The retreats are a transformative combination of live webinars with Sara herself, coupled with empowering online video programs designed to help you cope better with your breakup and start feeling happy again. For more details, head on over to heartbreaktahappinesspodcast.com, where you can also get a copy of Sara's free gift. Thank you, and join us again on the next episode for another dose of Heartbreak to Happiness.